All right. Paparazzi. Yeah, no worries. All right, so we'll start with Lamrim Guru Yoga. From the heart, actually, just a second. All right, from the heart of the savior of the 100 deities of the Shita, on a peak of cloud resembling a clump of extremely white fresh curd, king of Dharma, Nissen, Losan, Drapa, please come here together with your sons. And this cloud for me on lines. Just a second. My perfect pure Guru smiles with light, supreme fill of merit from a mind of faith. Please abide for 100 years to spread the teachings. Your holy mind is the intelligence that understands the full extent of objects to be known. Your holy speech with its excellent explanation is an ear ornament for those of good fortune. Your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory renowned. To you who are meaningful to see, hear, and remember are prostrate. Pleasant drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, lights, scented waters, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings, both actually arranged and mentally emanated, I offer to you the supreme field of merit. Whatever non-virtue of body, speech, and mind, especially those opposite to the three vows that I've collected from the beginning of this time, I confess each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. You strive for much learning and practicing this degenerate age and made your freedoms and richnesses meaningful by abandoning the 8 worldly concerns. Savior, we sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. Perfect pure holy gurus from the billion clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dhammakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dhamma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. May whatever virtue I have collected benefit the teachings and non-transmigrated beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of the perfect pure Losan Jakpa's teachings to shine forever. Sashi Poki Jun Shin Leto Ramri Rabli Nidege Pani Sangye Shindu Mite Owa Hindroku Namda Shilachopasho. By the merits of having offered this mandala to Lamrim Kappa and his 2 sons, may I, my family members, and all sentient beings be able to meet, practice, and actualize the teachings of the victorious on Losan Jakpa, who had a morality of an eminently pure way of life, who courageous in the extensive conduct of the sons of the victorious one, and accomplished the yoga of 2 stages of supreme bliss and emptiness. Idang Guru Ratna Mandala Kandiyatayami. By the force of having fervently requested in this way, hollow beams of white light are emitting from the hearts of the perfect pure father and sons and combining into one antenne-like crown. White nectar, the color of milk, flows from the opening of the tube of white light, cleansing all my sicknesses, spirit harms, negative karmas, obscurations, and the imprints without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. So we're going to do the 5-line Mixima verse in page 13. Mimete wete chen chen rezi, jime kimbe wampo jampe yang, dopo malu jomse sanwe da, kanchen kimbe tsungen tsonga pa, lo sanja be shabla sowa de. Mimete wete chen chen rezi, jime kimbe wampo jampe yang, dopo malu jomse sanwe da, kanchen kimbe tsungen tsonga pa, lo sanja be shabla sowa de. Mimete wete chen chen rezi, jime kimbe wampo jampe yang, dopo malu jomse sanwe da, kanchen kimbe tsungen tsonga pa, lo sanja be Shabla Soade.
Sangi Chedan Soji Chonula Chanche Pardu Dana Kyausunchi Dagi Cheshi Gibin Sonum Jolan Benshi Sangi Drupara Sho Sangi Chedan Soji Chonula Chanche Pardu Dana Kyausunchi Dagi Cheshi Gibin Sonum Jolan Benshi Sangi Drupara Sho Sanji Chedan Soji Chonumla Shanji Bardu Dani Kyavsun Dagi Chushi Gibin Sonum Ji Rolam Sanji Drupara Shu Kanki Tuzi Nizone Tawa Tamchi Pambi Chere Tambi Chun Denze Kodam Kela Chanze Lo. Good morning, everyone. Could see my teacher La. How are you? How is your holiday? Good. When you come back? Tangaskazi and someday direction any sola tukya any kunjo mutomati sachi trupati direction sra.
Now we're looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's milling presentation of the states of the path of enlightenment, and we're currently covering the topic of going for refuge. Particularly, we're now looking at the fourth point, which is the way that we take up the training after having gone for refuge. So the sixth point in that section speaks of not giving up refuge, even if at the cost of our life. Let's look at the text. Maintaining your refuge, and do not forsake the 3 jewels at the cost of your life, not even in jest.
There is such a trouble in the trouble luso long them sawa tavi tetaki cheto kunjo tanani serv kundu dunga guman jumi cher chila pavja kyamudong nyam tamchishi yegi samji cheto ya kyabtongi sigma mao mao machawos mao machawos.
All right, so looking what the text says, there's no doubt that we will be separated from this body, life, and possessions. If we give up the 3 jewels for their sake, we will undergo continuous suffering in all successive lives to come. Therefore, we should vow not to abandon our refuge, come what may, not even utter words in jest about giving up our refuge.
그래서 다디 안주 균진지 쉬고 살에서 간스나 아니 겸도 땅 바이나 건조 땅 바이나 아니 새롭건도 동학기만 중그레스 딘자께 아니 건조라야 겹소니 겸도 땅이 말레스 송온디다 겸도 땅 바이나 건조르 땅 바이나 아니 새롭건도 동학기만 가진 중그레스야디 다 땡땡 안주 삼을 더 보여레스라.
So this point says that having gone for refuge, do not give up your refuge, because often we regard the refuge as the key for happiness and well-being in future lifetimes, whereas giving it up means that we will experience suffering in future lifetimes. So we need to think about it in a sense that it's not that we just say that, we also need to come up with reasons why giving up refuge might result in suffering in future lives.
데르다 군조 땅성디기 군조 르땅바티 간지 군조 숨라야 아니 이체라야 디차고라서 군조 숨라야 이체라야 아니 산기추 겐든 숨라야 이체라온디기 타르두 카르차르슬라온디 아니 비기게 뎀바다 아니 치 아니 참바 세와 간지 아니 세와 메비기 라온라야 아니 로신줄로드 균드에서도 차고레스로 더 딘디질에 때마도바나 아니 신줄로질에 슈는 드바나 로 신줄로질에 슈는 드바나 데니 아니 텔테니 동안 중거마도 대원종요 말아스로 딜다 균제조 디차고도스.
So the main reason here for saying that giving up the three objects of refuge, forsaking them, would result in suffering is that when we relinquish the three objects of refuge, it means that we give them up. In our mind, we relinquish the faith that we have in the three objects of refuge, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And when we lose faith in them, we lose the trust that they have in leading the way to a path of non-violence. We lose faith in the path of non-harmfulness, which means that if we lose trust in the path of non-violence or non-harmfulness, then we engage in erroneous behavior, harmful behavior, violent behavior, and so forth. That will be leading away to suffering in future lifetimes.
상기 점된디 따라 상기 점된디 상기 세디 뎀바 망인지로스로 잔댕글람려야 잔댕글람려야 경이진자 안디 지수 줘봐야나 아니 수수 가서다 잔댕글람려야 로투그로스로 아니 데비 세나만도 타비 공바 탐제기 공바라야 루투고라스 다 디다 멘튼비기 람질라야 디다 멘튼비기 따와지키는 줘봐야나 다 잔데 많이 비춰래 모두 셴바칸 요 말아왔어 딘자 잔데 망인기 간사티다 ям가치와 디 템비기 잔댕기 람 아니 쳬려야 아니 신줄로도 슈바 아니 쳬디 추진도 중인기 아니 겐된달라야 따와 신줄로도 키는 줘봐야나 아니 동아 용야지 마도 차만티바지 용야지 마도 아니 차디부 야부지 용야디 미시고 차드고자 아니 짬르타나 닝가차오레세디 데리스로.
After all, we regard the Buddha, the Bhagavan, as one that showed us a truthful path, a path that is involved with truthfulness and honesty. And as such, when we follow the Buddha, we follow the path of honesty and truthfulness. And that path is the path that leads to the state of liberation and to the state of enlightenment. So then if we do the opposite of that, if we turn back to the path that leads to liberation and omniscience with developing a path of truthfulness and honesty, if we develop aspects that are opposite to that, which means either being dishonest, not truthful, or getting involved with harmfulness or erroneous states, then it depends upon that, we will experience problems and suffering in future lives.
아니 촉실라 소바 딘디라 때니 용구여버디 베스우로스라 아니 지비 다지 소셈 마투라요 소바 아니 지 셰럽 만다마 남주그 만다마 때니 아니 도삼 용구여바 다 딘디기 담바이나 페나 아니 셰럽 담바 champion 담바 세벤 담바 딘디 이게 로더 여바이나 아니 마담이 촐은 로고야 짜오니는 분도 아스라.
And we can see that directly around in the world around us. We can see that such attitudes that are based on seeking our own victory, even if it comes at the expense of others, so seeking our own victory in seeking to defeat others, developing a sense of partiality, being dishonest in the way that we behave, is attributed to not being patient, not having a sufficient degree of loving kindness, not having sufficient degree of compassion. not being wise or smart about the way that we manage our affairs. Whereas the opposite of them, having sufficient loving kindness, sufficient compassion, sufficient patience, sufficient wisdom, and so forth, we're able to manage the way that we interact with ourselves and others in better ways.
다 딘디케이션 무차와인자 아니 세계 잠지처도야 아니 캡동이 식마와 무샤워스 라 아니 캡동이 식선다 간지 아니 캡숨려야 직 아니 마쿠바다 마롱위 식딘디 비기 세무 추디야 아니 진행가 말레스 로 진행 말레스 마마오스.
And for that reason here, Lamrim Kappa says that do not forsake them even in jest, even if you're just mucking around. So developing attitudes which are disrespectful, attitudes which are not quite right. Lamrim Kappa here says, don't do that even in jest.
대당 홍기교 담아 속이 다 딘디기베 아니 투습 난치니 camdro lalenta drobainza tawal tamjiji kombo tobiorasra nganzu di big lalenta ya phashani chi any samlo changlai matama dani nganzu ta kyo thomam danda ba tan khol ha de ya ko ani ken tindijil ten yungu yobanza ta dandi kalaya chi che tes chi ngontrebe kalaya ani khaju thudu sosulunga yismlaya nibo yob ti nibo tenchini ani chug samlo tolaya drotubana di any sender the chima tamjelaya randashan tamjelaya deep hengris or dirisung does ra.
Looking at the biographies of the masters of the past, great masters of the past that have attained the state of liberation or the state of enlightenment, they proceeded the path of honesty and truthfulness. And when we look at our current situation, finding ourselves still remaining in samsara and not being able to follow properly the paths that lead to liberation and omniscience, it is due to such conditions that we still find obstacles or difficulties in progression towards the state of liberation and enlightenment. So now when we think of our current situation, we can think that I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do whatever I can in order to create the favorable conditions for progressing along the paths that leads to liberation and enlightenment.
제다 만주 남주고 만단디 드니 최대스 심바이네야 아니 최디게 펜도 드리비 살려야 아니 네시 드라야기 냥가페 차고라서 비 직대스 심바 준센데 체네 아니 셴려야 아니 가서 다 녀주치야라 소바 아니 마쿠바 치야라 소바 간지 나게기 귤 딘디 송바이나 아니 최디 독도 차도라스더라 최디 최소 로고야디 백히쳔보 딘자 소스 테스모도 마시바네 디고 야자자다마 아니 펜비촐이야 탑 가르땅고도 가르땅고도 딘디기 삼노땅고야디 백히쳔보 차고서레스.
Without developing sufficient wisdom, it might be that we will develop some knowledge, some understanding, but rather than acting in a way that accords with that understanding, that accords with the Dhamma, we will not get any benefit, but we will get harm. In a sense that it is easy with little knowledge to become proud, to belittle others, to become disrespect to others, sometimes even to ridicule them. So it's important to make sure that even if our knowledge is not great, even if it's just a little knowledge, even if kind of it's not sufficient, that we try to use it to our best ability to at least abstain from harm if we cannot use it for the benefit of ourselves and others.
대전에 총갈 드로양서 디 대신시야발라 껴순드발라 랍지비 랍자식 다 고만남수 송데 이네 코마통스 어딘디식 송다디.
It says next, earlier masters spoke of a precept that you should train in going for refuge to the Tathagata of whatever direction you're headed in, but I've not seen a source for that.
다디 비 가서다 캡순 드로비 칼라야 아니 캡주기 율 비기 살답사 쇠도디 숭구여살다 아니 소수 촉칼 카데네 디 촉이 아니 대신 샤발이야 아니 캡순 조진 람고야 토치 로 초샴발에 삼다 무고서를 딘디지 더 고민 랍장 무스등이 토마소 이네 딘디지 송고서레스 다디 아니 제롬치 텔리아 콩문도스 로 도규고 콩메바인자 디 딘디지 레샤스 송고레 간지 아니 캡유 살테비 카툴라야 초시 삼겔에 비기 캡유 아니 살타 야디 개침부 빼차고 그래서 가주투도 디체고마도 초직마도 셴발이야 삼담 무고에 딘디 자원이 말했다.
Here Ramachan Kappa says that it seems that some say that wherever you're going to, whatever direction you turn, you should make applications or keep in mind the Buddha of that direction. And it might imply then that you don't need to bother yourself with other Buddhas. The only thing that you need to think of, that you need to turn your mind to, is the Buddha in that direction. Ramachan Kappa says that first of all, he hasn't seen any source for such views. Hasn't seen any source for that in Sutra, in Tantra. So for us, as the Buddha is one of the objects of refuge that we turn to, we keep in mind all the Buddhas of all directions, the four intermediate, the four cardinal directions, the four intermediate directions. All of them are objects of refuge for us, and we make applications to all of them.
딘자 콩고레 송바인자 와나 아니 디 콩도 송비게 아니 랍샤 셈버 투디 아니 콩 가오이거스 라바이나 아니 조지반데 아디샤기 아니 람드렌 나로리아 송요레스 조안신일라스.
Now Ramachan Kappa says that in stating that it does have a source. His source for such statements are teacher's lamp for the path of enlightenment.
애들 도모길 랍자 투 람드렌 조안신일라 소즈 랍자 당보스음니스 다 건조스음 소즈 랍자 당보스음디 도딜리시에스 라운디 아니 지준 참번 공부에 온도겐레 도디겐레 아니 귤라마로 소바니다 아니 캡송 남자디 아니 기부친 송연자 아니 데니셰요레스 치마 숨니 캡주 양라 투발레 종오스.
Following that, Ramachan Kappa says that thus the six common precepts are just as they appear in the commentary in the difficult points of the lamp for the path of enlightenment. Regarding the specific precept, the first three are explained in the sutra collection, whereas the last three appear in the six aspects of going for refuge. Now, there are also instructions drawn from Maitreya's ornament for clear realizations and from his ornament to the Mahayana Sutra, the Abhisama Alamkara and the Sutra Alamkara. So such precepts of going for refuge are found in all of those sources, and here Ramachan Kappa compiles all those different advice and instructions into his steps of the path of enlightenment.
랍자 대다당 가왈라 랍자 대다당 가왈라 아니 꺄므로 냠바당 꺄므로 동이 균규츠 송거다 냠바다 동이 균규츠니 네스라.
Now, the following point that Ramachan Kappa makes in his text is with respect to the way that we break the precepts of going for refuge, the way that we violate or contradict those precepts, and thereby they decline. It says, as for how transgressing these precepts become a cause for degeneration and relinquishing your refuge, it is this transgression of the precepts not to forsake your refuge even in the course of your life.
대들 담보 다 속기처 무동아 세디 속기처 무동아 가와 라원디 다 수수소 투구드나 아니 건조르 땅바이나 아니 꺄므로 동어레스 가와디 건조르 땅바데라 다디 꺄므로 동어이라스.
So here Ramachan Kappa says that what constitutes the relinquishment of your refuge is the transgression of the precepts not to forsake your refuge even at the cost of your life. That actually constitutes relinquishing it, which means that when we think of such situation, should you find yourself in danger for your own life, and then you relinquish your refuge, that constitutes the actual transgression of the precepts.
대신도 건조숨 비게 same thing be matana yangs matana teda the mintin be tembo so sumla ninzin chenas lo zeni nevaina jendu mama wadan gashi kyabla lo khewa tonglas tachik du bi ani konjola ya lo de di tongjogoras.
Similarly, Lamrim Tsongkhapa says, even if you do not forsake the three jewels, but you uphold both them, and another three teachers and so forth that are incompatible with them, then you transgress the precepts of not advocating other refuge. And by not having faith in your refuge, you also relinquish it. So we spoke about going for refuge and developing the deep heart or heart deep trust and faith that you have in the objects of refuge. So suppose that you hold the objects of refuge, but still in your mind, you hold other objects of refuge which are incompatible with them, then you transgress the precepts of not advocating other refuge.
Terda delaya jamru tong slaundi ngelaya jamru yabach gogorasra pi jamru domba len sanginji sheshachin sonyare mado ani suzugi jamru domba len me pi nambi chugolaya mashu inaya nambi shon nambi karsungu nambi tawa karendu nambi choba karendu tindilaya ani tona chewa zamgi ani jamru tong sedi yungyo mares yendi yanga zungi bachi go jigre dosra the jamru kilan sevi jela ani ninzing lola soba ra pigi wadindi chombaina ani kyayu kunjosula ya tachi du killing ichi chigin segi tamja du todrog yores tinza the di ani nyebachik changdrog dosra.
Now here we need to make some clarification, because when it says here that in those circumstances you're going to relinquish the objects of refuge, you're going to relinquish the refuge, what it means to say is that once you have gone for refuge and have taken upon yourself the refuge vow, once you have made that commitment in terms of the refuge vow, then having a mind that is still two-pointed, in a sense that you hold the objects of refuge as being your refuges, but also you still hold other objects as being your refuges as well. At this point, having made that commitment, you're going to be relinquish the vow, because we also need to consider that when there's the initial stage where we find some interest in the Buddhist tradition, right? So we haven't got a lot of idea about what Buddhism says. We haven't gone for refuge yet. We are still learning, studying, and so forth. So of course, at this point in time, if we do not hold the objects of refuge in our mind, if we have other refuges, it's completely, you can say that it's completely realistic. But then once we have made a commitment, once we have taken the refuge vow, in which we then made that commitment to hold the objects of refuge single-pointedly in our mind, if we still remain with a mind that is two-pointed, here Lamrim Tsongkhapa says that we're going to relinquish our refuge.
Teda majonas teda majon kondu sombi tachi ani sogicheya mudonwa teda ani mangawa teni shendu mama se ta inzing lola soba majon waina teda majona ani shemba kyamdru lavjada gawatsam penanga ju chisibunjo ta du choba pusel soba ani kyamdru lavja chagoras inaya kawkale yang ju ani chabaga tongdi temba jen choba pye jen ani chatongela soba di kyamdru lavjada gedro yorda inaya ani kyamdru tongi gychag mares kyamdru tongu yo mares.
So then, looking at what Lamrim Tsongkhapa says after that, I think that if these do not occur, it is a mere transgression of the precepts, but not a cause for relinquishing your refuge. So here we spoke of causes for relinquishing a refuge, such as, for example, giving up on the objects of refuge, relinquishing them mentally, or, for example, having that mind that is undecided or two-pointed mind, even after we have made that commitment. So Lamrim Tsongkhapa says that these are causes for relinquishing your refuge, but then still, in terms of the trainings that we take up, having gone for refuge, like, for example, making offerings to the objects of refuge, or going for refuge 3 times in the morning and 3 times in the evening. If we do not keep up with those training, then this is a mere transgression. But it doesn't, such actions do not constitute relinquishing your refuge.
예, 너네 대단한 값을 줘와니 산지기 템벌은 주비 고침부 인시 겸로 식점 뭐봐요나 아니 투폴도 총알 템바 임비 친한게 발지기 민즈와당스 연den기 개발은 깨하시 냠가외 콘콘도 표현기 카시아바다 직바다 연den 템바 소지고니 값수 송신 디 라우젤리 만다발라 베바 네도 치워스.
And then it says that thus going for refuge is the great gateway to the Buddha's teaching. If you're going for refuge is not mere words, you're relying on a serious superior power. Therefore, you will not be thwarted by external or internal hindrances, and various special excellent qualities will arise easily and be hard to diminish, thereby increasing more and more. So it is vital that you uphold your refuge by recollecting the fear and the excellent qualities explained above, and you strive to not transgress its precepts. Dila chiyochiktanshan dila chambotan dembadin nila kebakariana chiparve chimare. Kan tanden chiksoima chesande chiparve chimamares.
저단 데스 캐치에 이기레스라. 맞아. 다지 장부슬라온디 아니 직대 용자기 비게 톨린 로초고도스. 다 뎀바슬라온디 비 뎀벤넬루 타도바디 도마니 돌 삼당고도스라.
So then Victoria is asking, what is meant by truthfulness in this context? Is it synonym for honesty or something else? Well, Geshe reckons that there is a slight difference between the two, in that we can be honest in our affairs in a way that agrees with what honesty is perceived in the world that we live in at the moment, right? So that's a common common consensus of what being honest is and what not being honest is. Being truthful is more to do with how things work in reality, and the most subtle level of reality is emptiness. So when we're being truthful, we try to do whatever we can in keeping in mind the way that things exist in an actual sense.
수수기 대등기체도 아니 셴라야 아니 직 아니 가르스었다 마롱아 체라 소바 라 수수기 아니 세계체도 셴기 세계 쳐봐야나 디 장부 말았어 디 세 메비기 람차가 말았어 라 디자 장부세디 아니 세 메비기 람라야 sometimes 되봐 뎀바스 라운디 아니 뭐여 네서 아니 뎀비 네루 정디 아니 탑시 손데세디 디니 잔딩기 찍들이야 디니가 상거도 왔어라 상거랬지.
So when we think of these two, honesty and truthfulness, they relate to the two aspects of practice. So there is the practice of the conduct and the philosophical views that we develop. So to be honest, correspond to the way that we practice, in a sense that when we, for example, act in a way that is supposed to bring on happiness, and we think that just in order for me to be happy, in order for me to be well, it is all right to harm others. This is not a behavior that is honest. If we think that, for example, for the sake of getting food, drinks, and so forth, it is all right that I take it away from others, that I steal or deceive others in order to get what I need, this is not an honest behavior. So honesty then refers to our mode of behavior or to our practice, whereas truthfulness refers to trying to understand the way that things exist in an actual sense, the way that they exist. And therefore, when we speak of honesty and truthfulness, we combine those two aspects of method and wisdom into our practice.
아니 처음에 람책 말았어. 처음 마치바 셴래 내가 마치바 쌈기 아니 세워미비 전쟁이 남차고 여바이나 아니 지 아니 간경 르라발라 소바 디디 아니 세워미비 남라야 로기 위소리 딘지 마임바 로 장부세드 조 뎀발야 뚜니 아니 세워미비 촐런 로투바이나 간지 아니 쩌바디 셔럽을 때니 아니 탑 냠는 체토바이나 데니다 안 디 돈은 좀 맞추야지 싸우니까 요마라스 딘자 디송구야서레스라
Gerald Torlakarisai.
아 rid 신다 돌아 소바
Mm.
신라 뇌지 치마라
Mm.
처음에 람은 주고요 마라 만주와 짱기 처음에 람 짱만 주고 마라스
So to be honest, so maybe kind of in a loose sense, we can also here think of honesty as being fair or fairness, right? So to be honest or to be fair means that you have some understanding of what is true, the way that things exist, and you're trying then on that basis to behave in a way that is honest or fair as much as you can. So it has to depend upon the truth, or it has to depend upon your wisdom, developing your wisdom that understands the way that things exist. Because otherwise, if you then think of not being honest without relying on your wisdom, without relying on what is true, you can just as well say that inanimate things are honest, because trees and mountains and stones and rocks and so forth, they do not act in a way that harms others, right? So they do not act in a harmful way or a violent way. But we cannot say that their trees and such are honest. So to be honest or to be fair, we need to make sure then that we develop the aspect of wisdom, our own intelligence that understands well how things exist.
that 딘자 간지 짬로 측자 마임바 로 비라야 아니 산질을 잡수 우출을 잡수 견들을 잡수 세기 측자 마임바 same thing니 아니 이칠 레투바지 여바이나 아니 투퍼도 좋아요 그래서 들려 네바용 그래서 아니 지 짬주기 아니 네바 찬자 짬주를 때는 도투 그래 되는 사마 짬주를 때는 도투를 세기 짬주디 짬주 슉체종래야 라리가 버지 간지 먼저 파기시바나 짬주 슉체종래야 라리가 버지 뭐 디송도 아서런 투퍼도 좋아할 때바 임비스
So when we go for refuge, we say, I go for refuge to the Buddha, I go for refuge to the Dhamma, I go for refuge to the Sangha. And we want to make sure that we do not leave it just at the level of being a mere lip service, just saying the words but not meaning them. So we want to make sure that the intentionality is there, that from the bottom of our heart, we go for refuge. And the more we're able to do that, the stronger our refuge becomes, the more we're capable of, first of all, getting what we want, what we wish for, but also avoiding the harm or the suffering that we do not wish for. That will depend upon how strongly you go for refuge.
데데 어디서 간지다 디바르다 간주 짬주 거디 데네다 내가 조버로 저래도스 다이 딘자 아니 디나로라야 산지 템벌은 주고 고침부 인소한테 로 간지 개체슈지 내가 체슈직디 아니 짬루 차기요레스로
So at this point in time, we are finishing the section in the text that explains the way that we go for refuge. So of course, this is just a temporary, you can say that a temporary cessation of engaging with refuge, but we still maintain our going for refuge. So here, Lama Tsongkhapa emphasized the importance of this stage, as he called that the great gate for entering the Buddha Dhamma. It says here, the going for refuge is the great gateway to the Buddha's teachings.
아니 짬로레스 랑아준 덴바 당부 되는데 짬로 측지시든 된거도 진짜 고 당보인자 아니 짬로 님아 딱봐 아니 짬로 곰고야디 베키침부 직차도 다 짬로 곰이야기 아니 탑이 약슈디 단단한 디게 나눠라야 사제지도 아서로 사제디 인지민지 사제의 출전이 인지도를 되기를 출전이 디시송기마 아니 고미하기 탑시 제바이나 아니 곰 대우 빼요레스로.
So it is important in our practice to make sure that we begin it with going for refuge. That's the very beginning of engaging with a spiritual practice, just like what we do, for example, in these sessions. Every session would begin with a recitation of refuge. So it's important to do it, and it's important to do it daily, to meditate on refuge. So in order to do that, we can use the outline for Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings on the steps of the path of enlightenment. So it is likely that this text that we're using has at the end an appendix with the outline for going for refuge, or you can find it elsewhere. It is actually quite common, quite available. So it's good if in your meditation to use this outline and to cover those points in sequence all the way through going for refuge and also after that.
예, 난 베나 겸주 장원디 니마질이야 그 겸주 쇼응 상말로 니마다바 로고초나 가부러 진짜 대체도 아니 사지 코라마 아니 사지 되기라 아니 상을 가주토도 땅바이나 베탑 되고 요반자 안가주 사지지 양장이 사지도 마치 로단을 상스 사지도 요리죠라
표시 놀라요.
오케이 야
So Geshe said that after all, when we do a daily meditation and when we rely upon those points that are found in the text, it's really difficult every day in a practice to read through the relevant sections and to read them in their entirety. Often we don't have the amount of time that is required to do that extensive meditation that is involved with having all the texts together. So it's important then to at least structure a meditation around the outline so that once we familiarize ourselves with the material, then we just know what we need to meditate at this point in time and what comes after that. So the outline is important, and Geshe thought of maybe just briefly reviewing the outline. What we go to at this point in the outline. Let's see if the text has an outline here.
예, 이번 직된 침말 대비 탑 땜바 니 땜바를 주고 고탐바 장르 장어 내래 탐지 기사와 이지기 대박게 봤어 땜는 거 되는 쪽으로 들어
Doesn't it come to cheaper than the all right, doesn't see. I don't see an outline here, but it's easy to get an outline, at least from Lama Tsongkhapa's extensive presentation of the steps of the path of enlightenment from the Lamrim Chenmo. You have a very extensive outline. But then, at least when we look at the outline for going for refuge, it begins with training in the going for refuge, the holy gateway for entering the teachings and generating the faith of conviction in actions and their effects, the root of well-being. Now, when we look at the first point, training in the going for refuge, the holy gateway for entering the teachings, there are 4 main points to this section. The causes of going for refuge. Based on those, the objects to which you go for refuge, the way in which you go for refuge, and the steps of training after having gone for refuge.
그래서 사지 고란라야 직된 침마 대비 탑 땜바스 직된 침마 대비 탑 땜바스 송반스 디 인지미 이샘을 샤고지 그러 먼저 디 대기 체도 디 론조 체도 아니 겸주 땜바이나 고든 대점 용구요 말았어 그러 된자 직된 침마 대비 탑 땜바야 아니 겸주 땜바이나 디 파르체디 랑싱 시도야지 디 쇼려야 아니 신디 전단 주용야지 책은자 뒷배마서 개침부 찍차거도스라.
Now this whole section comes under the heading of relying on the means to gain happiness in future life. So it's also important to keep in mind that when we go for refuge, it's not that we go for refuge mainly in order to make this lifetime better, in order to fulfill the purpose of this lifetime. This is not a main objective. Here it says relying on the means to gain happiness in future lifetimes, happiness and well-being. And if we go for refuge in seeking mainly first off, or the bare minimum, to secure better states, happiness and well-being in future lifetimes. As a byproduct, on the side also, areas in this life, some areas in this life, some points pertaining to this life become better.
다들 배로 샤바나 나도 산이기 산이 야부지 용약이 쳇로 산이 대부지 용약이 쳇도 대리상로 땅토 봐야나 대링기 된다디 디그로그라스다 디셜이야 로 산이기 된다 쳇도 대리 내가 최고의 용거리 대리상 땅과 용거리 도수 지원디기 대리기 된다디 믹스의 상로 마다와네 대리 기부 용약 상로 마다와네 양코 대리기 된다 따다 디그로야지 대리기 된다 디어마즈 산이 야부 용야지 로 디난신 그 로치마 이 야 야부 용약이 쳇도 론디나는 차시 샤바야나 아니 로치마들 론디 니가래 야부 용야지 그래 깨어치마세 니리 소리지래도스로 간지 깨직 니바니 아니 치마리 아니 깨직 니바들에 야부 중요하지 깨직 담비깔이야 제도바나 아니 가두는 디그도야지 차관자 아니 지금 치마디비 탑템바세디 배 아니 냉가치 차고사레스.
It is similar to saying that if you make sure that tomorrow will, whatever you need to do tomorrow will go well. If you make preparation for tomorrow, if you think of securing the purpose of what you need to do tomorrow, also today's purpose is also going to be fulfilled. In that, if you have made enough preparations and tomorrow comes and everything goes well, then you feel quite happy. So also today's purpose will be established. So if you do not think of, I have to make sure that I enjoy myself today, that I have, that my life is made meaningful only today. If you don't think about tomorrow and only focus on today, then things could go into disarray. But if you think, I need to make preparation for tomorrow, I need to make preparation for next year, I need to make preparation for the next moment, from what comes after this moment. If you make such preparations, also whatever you do at the moment becomes meaningful. So the same thing also happens with making preparation for future lives. If we are, for example, here rely on the means to gain happiness in future lifetimes, then on the side also this lifetime goes better.
데리다 다 산이기 때도 상로 마당하지 데리기부 땅지 비기 초칼 판조 니만은 데 아라통 라스된 산이 네버 내장 차야기 년가 빼요로스 디소르지 마지와 아니 쳇디지 올이야 아니 상로 마당하 겨 망부 링거야 차시 샤투와이나 베겐센심보다 디 조디 아니 겨 치말이야 야부 용약이 탑조디 아니 쳇델이야 미기 좁은 거 수중 구습이 아니 냠니 치야들은도 디 아니 치마치진 치야려야 아니 겹려야 된 거야 겹tempo 산지 아니 중 겹주비다로 겐돈 딘딜려야 된 바이나 아니 지든 치마디비 탑디 준투구연자 디레 당보들려야 시 칸라데니 겹수주비 규 델라데니 겹수주비 유 지점 겹수 겹수 라버치비 림바오세 안 사지 시디 연구도 아스라.
If we don't think of what will occur to us tomorrow, we're just concerned with what happiness or well-being we can get only today. We might think that today I'm just going to enjoy myself. I'm going to go out, have some sunbathing, have a few drinks, sit by the ocean or by the side of the lake and so forth. And without thinking of what will happen to us tomorrow, we can actually get sick if we only indulge in such pleasant circumstances of today. So here, when we rely upon the means for happiness, for gaining happiness in future lifetimes, we think of many lifetimes that are still awaiting for us. And the key for securing a good status rebirth in future lifetimes is to guard the ethical discipline that abstains from the 10 known virtues. So we do it in this life. In this life, as much as we can, we practice ethics in which we abstain from the 10 known virtues. And also when we go for refuge, in thinking that I go for refuge to the Buddha, the teacher, I go for refuge to the Dharma, the actual refuge, and to the Sangha, those that help me or assist me to accomplish the refuge, it has a great effect of our future lifetimes. Our orientation is such that we are mainly concerned with what will occur to us in future lifetimes. So as such, Lama Tsongkhapa is speaking of the means for securing happiness and well-being in future lifetimes in 4 points. So he says, first of all, let's look at identifying the objects of identifying the causes for going for refuge, then identifying the objects for going for refuge. Then it says, this is the way in which you go for refuge. And then the 4th point is, what are the trainings that you take up? What are the precepts that you need to train it once you have gone for refuge? So then, looking at the main outline for refuge, it says, after this 4-point outline, the causes for going for refuge, although in general there are many causes, here it is in fact explained above that we do not stay in this life but die soon, and after death we do not All right, sorry. So Geshe hasn't started to read through this section. After the point that identifies the causes, the 2 causes for going for refuge, then the 2nd point is based on those, the objects to which you go for refuge. So the 2nd point has 2 points, identifying the objects of refuge and the reasons why they're worthy to be a refuge. So identifying the objects of refuge, that's quite easy. We have the 3 objects of refuge, and the reasons why they're worthy to be a refuge, in a sense that here we're looking at the reasons why for you they're suitable objects of refuge, or for us they're suitable objects of refuge. What makes an object of refuge be a valid, a suitable object of refuge, and what features a certain object might have which would render them to be incapable of giving you the protection that you seek. So here, this section that explains the reasons why they're worthy to be a refuge is of a great significance to us. So the 3rd main point in the section for going for refuge is the way in which you go for refuge. That has 4 points. Going for refuge by way of understanding their excellent qualities, by way of understanding their distinctions, and by way of commitment, and by way of not advocating other ones. Now, beginning with the first one, going for refuge by way of understanding their excellent qualities, it says, since this requires recollecting the excellent qualities of the objects of refuge, this has 3 points. So the qualities of the Buddha, the qualities of the Dhamma, and the qualities of the Sangha. Then the 2nd way to go for refuge is going for refuge by way of understanding their distinction, then going for refuge by way of commitment, and finally, going for refuge by way of not advocating other ones.
디 choba pyujene ani kunju songi yonde tembi toni choba pyutu wanada ani choba lana meba di chagido asra.
So the section that explains the excellent qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha for us is very important. We can also incorporate this section in a way that we make offerings. So we said that, for example, that in making offerings, we think that the qualities of the Buddha are inconceivable. The qualities of the Dhamma for us are inconceivable, and likewise the qualities of the Sangha are inconceivable. To us, to all who have such excellent qualities and make offerings.
Terdadinan chendi gabji tujaru muchi chen gyangindi lamrum ki sajel ya chendi gabji tujaru muchi chen gyabshas rota di kechenbu shuj la ya signi ani change gyamni da ani chengi kasa tsignyu di toni ani gyamdru ki sajje di ko raya ki chedo da sonyo di testik ani lobjong cheto bana yasa gyatamba lamrum jutsu dodo sotu yagi
Now, Geshe, in his text, is using a compilation of a Lamrim text that was put together by Chidren Rinpoche that combine different annotations to the Lamrim based on other Lamrim texts and other texts as well. So in his text of annotation includes really useful advice for, like, for example, meditating on the outline of the Lamrim. So it's also important that we get such instructions, and as much as we can, we also incorporate them into our own personal meditation practice. Dila doing it dila doing it dila injik tonamindu.
Shiva Gyabsone Labachevi Rimba la ni Gyabsum Suzu Labsha, Tumungi Labjas, Ambola ni Gaba the Dribi Labsha.
Anyway, having looked at the outline, let's go back to what we're covering at the moment. So we started with the steps of training after having gone for refuge. And here it says, this has 2 points, specific precepts relating to the individual objects of refuge. So this is what we finished covering now. Now we're going to look at common precepts relating to all 3 objects of refuge. So let's begin with those common precepts.
Yes.
Where is it? There it is.
That Tumungi Labsha Delia Troop, Conjusum Cabar the Yonde Jesu Chamber, Yang Nan Yang to Capsun Drova, Garden Chimbo Jesu Chamber, 2000 Chapel Junction, Sava the Javi Pulkam Bova, Ninji Chimbo Jesu Chamber, Drova Shea, Sunduttavala Goba, Java Khan Cheba Tang Goba Chiabana, Conjusum Chun, Sovan Devshi, Jigdembi Tabshin Poma. Now
looking at the common precepts relating to all 3 objects of refuge, there are 6 points in this section. The first one is, by recollecting the distinctions and excellent qualities of the 3 jewels, go for refuge again and again. The second is, by recollecting the great kindness of the 3 jewels, always make effort to honor them and offer them the first portion of your food and drink. The third is, by recollecting great compassion, establish other beings in this kind of practice. Following that, number 4 says, Whatever activities you engage in, and whatever your purpose, honor the three jewels and make requests to them, abandoning all other worldly methods. The fifth is having understood its benefit, go for refuge 3 times a day and 3 times at night. And finally, the sixth is maintain your refuge and do not forsake the three jewels at the cost of your life, not even in jest.
대당 아번 평일에 겸주 평일 넘버 산기버 추바 넘버 탐지 때도 결과 문사비 레드남 sabshin seven gyuwa sonam jachimbo soba ngandrumu tongwa medamima yingi parchi mutsuba chi samba tamjin druba nyudu sangyawa was.
Tanto de sociologia. All right, let's look.
Payget.
All right. Then there's a section of having understood its benefit, go for refuge 3 times a day and 3 times at night. It says there are 8 benefits. Here it is, the measure of being Buddhist. It is the basis of all vows. The karmic obscurations accumulated previously are reduced and exhausted. One accumulates vast merit. One does not fall into the law of rebirth. One is not harmed by humans and non-human hindrances, and one accomplishes everything one wishes, and finally one swiftly attains Buddhahood.
That jamdu saje dimado yo marisra that di and this suji then di tola samatan di and saje di chona manga tola suntu one be masive keba chimbo yungu yoresra.
So Geshe here briefly went over the outline for the section of going for refuge. So it's really beneficial. Let's see if I have it here. It is really beneficial to meditate on refuge in this way. And if you at least can memorize the section of going for refuge to your mind, then it will bring you great benefits.
Tadine tanji kong saje nibadi deli tamji yitsawa yichi teba jamba seti.
Anyway, with that in mind, let's look at the next section in the Lamrim text. So the next section is karma and its effects. So it says, generating the path of conviction in actions and their effects begins with 3 points. Contemplating karma and its effects in general. Dilatanda lender wala. Yeah. So contemplating karma and its effects in general, and contemplating karma and its effect in particular, and having contemplated karma and its effect, how to engage in virtue and desist from non-virtue.
Teresa, Tandama Loshainda, Tambala Nis, Chir Sam Tsungo, Soso Che de Samba, Lende, Tambala She, Ling Ibitsul, Le Pecheva, Le Majeva the Miteba, Lecheva Chumasavos, Tambo Sosu Kewotam, Pava Kanya, Sora Civi, Number Jingi, Deva, Tana Simjin Yeva Kevana, Long Seva Lambala, Danny Keva Yanchi, Tamjeni, whom give less avali chonki. Megiwi lesabal devan jongan ne mela sowa dongwi number chenki dongar thana dajun bi gyola keba menche tamje kun megiwa sabali chongi gewi leli dongan jongan ne me derin jen tamali megiwali donga kun dejen ngandro tamje don gele dendro tamje de keba kundu devata che sonsos.
So when we begin with the section that explains karma and its effect in finding conviction in the methods that bring about happiness in future lifetimes, we begin with contemplating karma and its effects in general. Now, the general contemplation has 2 points: the actual way to contemplate karma and its effect in general, and contemplating the specific categories. Now, when we begin with the actual way to contemplate karma, there are 4 points. Karma is certain. Karma greatly increases. You do not meet with karma you have not created, and karma you have created does not dissipate. Let's begin with the first aspect of karma, which says that karma is certain. All happiness that is a type of pleasant feeling, whether in ordinary beings or Aryas, comes from virtuous karma accumulated previously. This includes even pleasures such pleasures as small as the pleasure in a sentient being born in hell when a cool breeze springs up. There is no way for happiness to arise from non-virtuous karma. All suffering that is a type of painful feelings come from non-virtuous karma accumulated previously. This includes even pains as small as the pain in the mind of an arhat. There is no way for suffering to arise from virtuous karma. The precious garland says, from non-virtue comes all suffering, and likewise every lower rebirth. From virtue comes every fortunate rebirth and the happiness in all rebirths.
Terda dindigi karsoda dedu ki jongdang sanamadu ani dedu di ani lege megelaya tudang ki rimba di jangbalaya thoma ji gyundre ki rimba sayadi gyundre ki rodang tolaya samlu tanya di pe kechimbu chik chago sare sirwa manzu ani dushi ki chu kanda jingba inaya ko gyugin chila teni yonggoya jimado gyugin jingkondo masongba ani dushi ki chu di chubsu chubshawa zawani mewa de ku nguyoro wasro tinzada ani gyu khanda jila tengu gu yemedi ro pena chi zanghombo jimba na gyu pigi ani chi ani sada chuda ani chi chela soba tinri mangbo ji ngebo changgo dasro mansangwa yongya mebadi tinza ko ani jebu khorangi ngongdan tumbigi ring tumbi gyu jila ya madembar jebu de troya mebadi ani pigilaya chik ngeba ni toba chombayna ani gewada devada dungar sayadi ani le gedigla teni jongu yobigi ani yichegi tebadi ani shukcheri yonyala ya pendo yungo saresra.
So here the first reflection on karma constitutes thinking of the certainty of karma. So what we take up into a practice when we develop the methods for cultivating happiness and avoiding suffering is the training in finding conviction in the way that virtuous actions produce happiness and non-virtuous actions produce suffering. So first of all, we think of causality. We think of the level of causality in which causes and conditions produce the corresponding effects. So whatever compounded phenomenon there is, it comes into being, it comes to pass and depends upon its preceding causes and conditions, and without its causes and conditions occurring, it cannot come to be. That's the first thing that we think of. And also, not only we think that this is in line with reality, we also think of whatever existing as a compounded phenomena has its own corresponding or compatible cause and conditions in that when we look at things outside, plants, grass, and so forth, they have their own corresponding cause and conditions. So for one blade of grass to grow, it needs to have its compatible cause and conditions, water and food and soil and so forth. So similarly, when we look at the range of experiences that we have, happiness and suffering, pleasure, pain, and so forth, all of them arise and depends upon their compatible cause and conditions, in that virtuous actions produce happiness and well-being, and non-virtuous actions produce suffering.
Dinanga tisir dedu nan gyumedang zoodang onshuso mentubi gyuli chongya memba gimigi lechili dedu chedang dedu gi khabar hasoba namja leji khabar hasoba le chongse jam machorwa susun jongwe lende ngeje nam mulo wala ngeba nyeba ni sanjeba tamjegi yantabi tawa shishawa kachu tamjegi shirin ngaba was.
So continuing with the reading of this section, it says, therefore, happiness and suffering do not arise without cause or from an incongruous cause, such as the fundamental nature or Ishvara. Happiness and suffering in general arise respectively from virtuous and non-virtuous karma in general. Also, the various specific instances of happiness and suffering each arise from the various specific instances of the two types of karma without any inconsistency. To gain certainty with regards to actions and their effects being certain and infallible is said to be the correct view of all Buddhists and praised as the foundation of all virtuous phenomena.
Terda karsoda tinza nganzu lel teni chongwa res laundi lel teni chongwa res laundi pe ane chi gyuchi tsawa nin tangi mebigi ane tsowal le dewa teni kapkal ta nganzu yungu dosara lel chongwa res laundi chi zobji gyaya mebi namba tu tenji tsawa nin yin samares ro ane dedu gi tsawa di le gedik la ra le bares le gedik singi di kolong la ra le bares laundi kolong gi toni ane le sagi yobadi sibu song ras dinza ane le di kolong toni le sagi yobana ane kolong chig toni le di ane gyuchi tanya dia yodeba tichago ras ro.
Often we say things like, it all happened because of karma. Things arise because of karma, which make it sound as if things are preordained or they're destined to occur in a particular way and we have no way to make a change. So this is not at all true. This is not at all correct, because when we look at how things occur because of karma, whatever we experience, happiness or suffering, arise because of actions done before, and those actions were motivated by a certain state of mind. So motivations can change. We can change the motivation for performing actions, and through that we can change the course of karma.
아니 태버침비 최든 태제 아니 랑기 남주 주니 디바 균이 깨워치말아야 아니 덴로지야기 레톱신 야샤자다마 쌓여 여러와서 데메바 있는 간주 덴델이야 아니 칼리잡니 쳐드발이야 아니 고든치에 매주 차그러와서 디
We can say that there's no doubt that we've already accumulated multitudes of causes for being born in miserable states of existence, as an animal, as a preta in a hellish state of existence. We can probably say that there's no doubt that we've already created many actions for them. But also thinking of this life in which we have met the Buddha Dharma, and we also have the ability to develop our mind to a certain degree, so that in our future lifetimes we do not go to such miserable states of existence, but we go into a pleasant state of existence. We have the ability to do that. Although we have accumulated causes before for miserable states of existence, we can manage our affairs in a virtuous way, in a positive way in this life, so that we can avoid miserable states of rebirth in future lifetimes.
이데마 찍로 자자인데 이번에 레게와 총을 레짱 제부 대와 치순도 종라 레 먹이와 총을 레짱 제부 동아 치순 제무 종위 난기 균제지 펜자와는 펜두인지 페왔던 집셋 규진의 칼라 난기 균제지 펜 좀렌데
Let the jungle dewa deshin chewa gewa lem gewa chungul kyang dewa dunga shintu chewa jungle nangi gyungde gi pel sigire pel drawani
yeah pel drawani churugi gyundela metals.
Now the second general point with respect to karma is karma greatly increases. It says, even from a small virtuous action, there arises enormous happiness as its effect, while even from a small non-virtuous action, there arises enormous suffering as its effect. There is nothing amongst external causes and effects that resembles the increase of effects from internal causes.
Terda gedik sedi gedik le sedi chunchunjigi debu deduk chembun jinyagi pigi kasata dodan di nanshingi chirogu gyundela ya yomares nangi gyundela ya tandel ane chinangi gyundini songu dasra nangi gyundeslavandi gedik la teni deduk jonsu di nangi gyunde pigi sumjingi gyugi dubigi 아니 균데란 들어간자 난기 균데스 치료기 균데스라운데 지신 로돌로 소바 라 드르글라 소바 디디 심징이 기기 마디비 균데 디스 딜라고라스 라.
Here, Lama Tsongkhapa says there is nothing amongst external causes and effects that resembles the increase of effects from internal causes. What it means to say is that when we look at the external world and when we look at internally our own karma, the way that karma increases, magnifies, is dissimilar to the increase in effects in the external world. So we look for examples outside of ourselves, plants, trees, and so forth. And it seems that the magnification of karma, the increase of karma that occurs internally is much greater than the one that occurs externally. So whatever negativity or virtuous action we take, even if they're just slight, they can bring up enormous results.
대한 소문의 대고 중국 제비견 지된 버른 지전당 폰드 친구 제규 개발 소유 독신노 소놈 중국 제비견 지된 버르 대전된 된전 다전 제규된 저놈 분소 멤버신 시소스.
The collection of indicative verses say, even creating a small bad deed will result in terrible fear and disasters in future lives, like having ingested poison. Even creating a little merit will bring great happiness in future lives and accomplish vast objectives, like grains that ripen to perfection. We will leave the text here for today. Let's do the final Lamrim dedication. Just a second. For my two collections, vast space that I've amassed from working with effort that is practiced for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eyes blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be beheld in your loving compassion for all lives, Manjushri. May I find the best of complete graded paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the point of the path that I have discerned it. May I uphold the Buddha's teachings for a very long time, with my heart going up with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined. May I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and may the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time by even this graded path to enlightenment, completed due to the wondrous, victorious, virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all humans and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtues practices, may always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere.